with Cotton Incorporated. And from that, research and promotion for cotton is done with those dollars. As you all know, Cotton Incorporated is a vital participant and partner in our meetings and in our research and promotion that we have. And we want everybody to know where those dollars are going. So therefore, we have our state support Zoom meeting like we have today. Cotton Incorporated's world headquarters are in Raleigh, North Carolina. And as you all know, we have tours that go out there several times a year so that we can go out and show you specifically where your dollars are going and what they're being used for. But Cotton Incorporated also has headquarters in New York and in Mexico, in Osaka, in Shanghai, and in Hong Kong. Okay, Stacy, can you advance? So the assessment dollars are on a per bale assessment. And as a matter of fact, yesterday I had a couple phone calls asking me how that assessment comes around. And it's $1 plus 0.5% of a bale of cotton. And producers and importers participate. And it's a very unique partnership. And no other industry has a partnership such as what we do to have the producers as well as users. And as you can see, producers bring in about 54% and importers have about 46% participation from a dollar perspective. And the overall compliance with everyone participating is 99%, and it's the highest in the industry. The 22 budget that we are starting this year is an $82 million budget. It's up $2 million from last year. And I want to assure you that your funds and the board members that have been actually out there saving dollars to make sure that the research stays consistent is in excellent shape. The priorities for 22 are sustainability, product innovation, obviously our farm profitability, our cottonseed value, and it, as always and has been lately, our link contamination. We want to make sure that we stay on those key primary issues for you. And if there's anything out there that we need to address, we've got board members that are out there with you guys. And as a regional communications manager, we're happy to take notes and listen to you. On our Cotton Incorporated state support research program, 7.5% of the dollars of the assessment go back to each state. And each state has a board that is available to and ready to make those decisions as to where those dollars are going to go into the research for their specific state needs. I have a list of those that are on the next slide, but those research projects are managed by our Cotton Incorporated Ag Research staff team. You all know Gaylon. Cater Hake is also on. There's Ryan Kurtz and others that are out there that are specific for their states. But as you know, Gaylon is our Texas and Oklahoma guy. So our state board members for our state support meeting, Stacy, if you'll advance to the next slide, please. Those are listed here below. And we've got a lot of them. They're across Oklahoma and Kansas both. And as I said, we're always happy to go out and be in the field with these guys as well as you are, and want to make sure that everybody is ready to go when it comes to state support meetings. We host our state support meetings in July of each year, and we'll review what we've done in the prior year and go forward. I will tell you that the dollars that are being pushed to the state, you have one of the highest returns on your investments of any state out there for Oklahoma and for Kansas. Kansas program is very small because it's new. Oklahoma has been around for a while, and they do a tremendous job making sure that as researchers and promoting cotton, that those dollars are used very, very well. So with that, I thank you. I appreciate your patience, and we're going to turn it over to Seth, if you're ready to go.
Yes, I'm ready. Golly, Shelley, now I'm nervous. I can't share my screen anymore. You get me worried.
I'm not sure. It worked earlier.
Let's see. I think you're probably going to see an email. There. Is that showing?
It's got an email.
Oh, it says it's paused. How about now?
We still see your email, Seth.
I hope it's not a bad email. I don't know which one was frozen up there.
There you go.
Okay. So I'm going to give a quick overview, and like Shelley mentioned, it's based on, production. And for Oklahoma, I started in Oklahoma in 2018. Prior to that, I was in Texas. So I came from a position where the state support was pretty huge, and we had a lot of folks involved in the state support program. And when I first started in Oklahoma, there were 2 to 3 folks that had been working in cotton at OSU. You see here sort of the trends in acres. So 2018 is sort of in the middle of this uphill climb. So acres were up, more bales were being produced, so we had some more funds. And so we've reached out to additional faculty members at OSU to be involved in cotton research. And so we have a lot more projects funded now. And here's a slide on production in terms of pounds per acre average. So I'm going to quickly go through the project. Some of them I've summarized into a bullet point. Some of them I've got a little more information on. I didn't think I'd have time to go through everything. So some of the shorter ones I'm going to talk about. So Todd Bauman is our weed scientist. He has just wrapped up a study where he was looking at the control of volunteer dicamba and 2,4-D resistant varieties. So obviously with new traits, things that we could once control with an auxin herbicide, we can no longer. And so he was working on that. So that project, I believe he's wrapped up. Some of the work he's working on now, I think he's got a few different things going on. One of them deals with evaluation of residual herbicide programs in cotton. I think he and I both are working on some of the new traits. I believe he may have some of that in his state support program as well. And Brian Arnall is our soil fertility specialist. When he first got involved, he was working on cotton response to pH levels. And this was primarily in central Oklahoma dryland systems. So I mentioned that acres have gone up. A lot of those acre increases were in new areas, and sort of central northern Oklahoma dryland was some of the newer areas. I'll say now that we've kind of come back to that 500,000 mark, most of the increase we see is in more of our traditional areas, but there's certainly been a foothold gain in some parts of Oklahoma that weren't historically considered cotton producing areas. And so some of the research that was done really focused in on those areas. So that was a project that he wrapped up recently. They've now moved on to looking at nitrogen fertility rates and timings. And I believe that this project is one that's being conducted across the belt by some other fertility specialists as well. And so they've got several locations in Western Oklahoma, irrigated sites. So sort of back to that more traditional, cotton area and the irrigated side of things where we see a lot more of our inputs. So Jerry Goodson, he is now retired. I think Jerry used to tell me he was going to retire about every other week. I think he actually did retire this time. He was an extension assistant in IPM. So Jerry did a lot of the scouting and pheromone trap monitoring, pest updates. So we've got an opening, I guess, in our team that would normally have state support projects. Currently looking at hiring an extension pathologist. That job's been open for a while. If you know anybody who wants to be an extension pathologist in Oklahoma, let them know. We got a spot for them in Stillwater. So that would be a person I think could come in and do some work, particularly what's going on right now with some of the new disease issues in cotton. So now I'm going to kind of get a little deeper in a couple of the projects. So this first one's by Shelley Heinrich, who is our ag engineering irrigation specialist. So he's been working on improving water management for irrigated cotton in Oklahoma. And a lot of what Shelley does is based around using sensors, mostly soil moisture sensors, to figure out what technologies work the best for producers. So he does a lot of monitoring of sensors. He puts them out and sort of looks at how they can be used by our growers, particularly looking at the accuracy and then how they recommend irrigation applications. So, he's really trying to improve the on-farm management of irrigation. We've got a lot of different, we've got some drip in Oklahoma. We've got obviously the irrigation district where we have both drip and furrow water. Then there's a lot of pivots. So there's a lot of different irrigation methods that are going on and ways we can improve all of these. One of the things that Saleh found was that oftentimes we may be over irrigating cotton early, which in our kind of environment, obviously, we're going to be water limited more often than not, even in irrigated situations. So that might be a potential area that these sensors can really be a benefit to use to become more efficient with our water use early season. Jason Warren, he also works a lot with irrigation. He's our soil and water conservation specialist in plant soil sciences. Jason works a lot in the panhandle. So that's another area that had some cotton, and 25 years ago, it had some cotton. It's grown now. I think that's another area where we've kind of seen it maybe stabilize as far as the acres go, but the acres that are there are fairly productive acres. It's irrigated. It's an area where, maybe corn had been more common in the past, and now we're moving to cotton because of that water situation. But we don't really have any good tools to use for developing an irrigation schedule. And, that's an area where if you get your irrigation wrong, or your just water in general, if it rains too much, it's really hard to recapture that lost time and maturity issues. So he's working with both drip and overhead. I think the primary project from his state support funding is working with drip, and that's something that he and I started a project, I guess, 3 years ago now. The first year we had an irrigation impact. Since then we haven't, but we still learned a lot. So 2019 was the only year where he saw an irrigation effect. So this picture here on the left-hand side is any other treatment. He didn't tell me what was on the left, but on the right is a 40% ET replacement. So he's using ET, which is a pretty common method for scheduling irrigation in any crop, and it's something that's used by a lot of irrigation models. So it's something that if we can figure ET out here, we can plug that into a lot of different irrigation models and have something that's going to work. So his lowest irrigation treatment is what you're seeing here on the right, 40%. If you look at this table, here's our yields. So our yields were impacted by irrigation. So full is in this actual graph, full for us is 90% ET, 70% is 70% of full. So that's actually 63% ET, and 40 is actually 36% ET. It's a confusing structure, but we knew that we didn't want to go 100% ET in this location because you can almost guarantee that's going to be too much. So what we saw was that we were optimizing the pounds per acre. But when you look at quality and look at these loan values here, I mean, the only one's even close to the base is when we drop it down to 40% or 36% ET. So return per acre, and that's what we're really trying to optimize. I mean, these yields, yeah, 2200 is great. 2000 is also great. So I'm my lowest yield tier, but it's 2000. That number down there must be wrong, by the way. I didn't make this table, so I'll at least say that. But the takeaway is that we're optimizing our fiber quality and not really shorting ourselves on yield that much with these lower irrigation schedules. And that's the key. Producing pounds is obviously not easy, but producing quality pounds is a lot harder than that. So again, looking at 40% ET, he's also looking at, using pre-water here. So one thing that we looked at this past year in 2021 was, and I've been harping on about this, we should try one where we don't pre-water as much, where we don't fill that profile up. Let's see if we can manage our quality better without using, so much preseason water. So that's something that we're looking at now. One thing that I've taken away from this, and as an irrigation specialist, I'm sure Jason's not as excited, but to me, we've seen a big impact of variety on cotton performance in this study. And these are varieties that we've gone to companies and said, give us a variety that's going to fit in this area. So they're all under that same maturity category, but there's some huge differences in variety performance in this study. And I think that's key as well. So John Long is another engineering faculty. John works a lot with equipment technologies. I guess that's how I'll say it. He probably wouldn't say it that way, but equipment and sprayers, planters, harvesters of different crops. One thing he's doing with cotton is looking at ways to optimize. Basically, to me, I'm looking at this as optimizing emergence, optimizing that stand establishment. And so taking things that are in the field that may affect stand establishment and finding ways that we can use current technology to address those. And so he's working with a lot with EC zones. We know in areas, a lot of Oklahoma, is an arid environment. We do have salt issues, particularly in the district. There's some issues with salt. And so a lot of what John's doing is working with factors that we see commonly in those really high productive areas that may affect stands. And so he's looking at mapping EC in fields and then using onboard downforce adjustments on these planters to see if we can optimize emergence and establishment through downforce in these different EC zones. And John also started looking at seed sizes. So we'd give him a range of seed sizes. So different varieties have different seed sizes. Everybody, I'm sure, knows that. And he's looking at, so once we add in a factor of, small seed versus a large seed, how does that impact what we need to do when we're planting? And the neat thing about what John's doing, he does some stuff on a research scale. He does also in-field work. So he's using producer equipment. He maps the EC zones with his own stuff. Then he goes out there and he starts tweaking producers' planters. As they're planting, he starts changing downforce. Because a lot of these new technologies, our growers have them and we may not. So he's using things that they actually are using in the field to plant cotton. So again, trying to optimize that planter downforce settings for these different field conditions. We all know how we struggle to get a stand establishment more times than not in cotton. And with seed costs, every plant we get up out of the ground is going to be key. And so I think this study, he's already started making some headway with looking at seed sizes in these EC zones. I think we can get a lot of benefit from this kind of study. And then I'll just quickly cover a couple of things that I do. I guess the two main studies are our own farm variety testing program, where we're looking at commercial varieties and production settings to hopefully provide information for our producers to use when they start trying to narrow down their variety decisions. So we, look at yield potential and yield stability. We try to, help with variety placement, and then obviously looking at fiber quality. It also gives us a chance to evaluate these varieties for seedling vigor, maturity, PGR management, harvest aid response. When you've got them, 9, 10, 12, even this year we had some locations had 16 varieties. So that gives you a chance to make a lot of comparisons about, maturity and season vigor. And that can really help when we're trying to place varieties or maybe find a variety that's similar to one we've planted in the past. The other thing we've done is harvest date evaluations. And this is something that I've always done. Usually when I first started, I guess we were doing a lot of variety or product evaluations. More recently, we've tried to revisit the application timings. Get a lot of questions every year about, if I spray now, what's going to happen? And usually if they're asking me that question, it's because we're not at 60% open or 4 note of cracked bowl yet, which are our typical recommended thresholds. And so if you look at what's been done, the recommendations that we use in cotton were usually mostly established 20 years ago or more. And they've really not been investigated in Oklahoma recently at all. So just revisiting some of that. Our complete race trial or on-farm variety testing report is up. Well, I say complete. We've got all the data tables up. I need to go back in there and add some descriptions and some other things. But our website just posted the total location report yesterday. This is some of the pooled data. So if we're looking at, this is a dry land pool from 3 county trials. So if you're in the southwest part of the state, maybe you're in Harmon County and we didn't have a dry land trial in your county, or maybe you're in a part of Greer or Jackson or Tillman County that wasn't close to a trial. So we take that data from all 3 of those locations and pool it. So we get an idea of yield stability, and overall performance in an area of trials. And the same thing over there on the right. So these were varieties that were included in our 3 Southwest irrigation or irrigated on-farm trials. And so again, trying to get an idea of performance outside of one specific location, performance across a wide geographic area. And that's really the way we should be looking at varieties, especially if we don't have a trial on our farm. Another thing we can do, and this is from last year, this is what we need to do this year, is this would be called a yield deviation table. So basically, you got all the locations across the top. You got the varieties that were common to these locations going down the side. In the green are instances where that variety finished above the trial average, and then by how much. In the red would be instances where that variety finished below the trial average and by how much. And then on the very last column is the average yield deviation. So that's another way to look at yield stability. Again, a lot of what we're trying to do here is it's great to have a trial. It's great if you're close to a trial, but more often than not, and more acres of ours than not are going to be far enough away from a trial where I don't know if I have 100% confidence that I can just say, hey, I live in Greer County, I'm going to use that Greer County trial. I may need to look at performance from across a wide number of locations to get a better idea of does that variety fit. And so the more data we can provide and the more ways we can present it like this, where it's more of a stability reflection more so than just straight performance at an individual location, I think is helpful for a lot of acres. I've shown this slide a lot of the past 2 years, and I think it's a neat slide, but this is some of our bowl opening work from our various harvest day timings. There was a lot of takeaways from this study. Another thing we did was look at harvest from the whole plots. I don't expect anybody to look at all these bars or all these numbers on this slide. Basically, the takeaway from this was we've got some opportunities potentially to go earlier, but there's a lot of things that we need to look at further. So, you do these studies and you think you answer some questions, but you may answer the first one you had, you bring up a whole lot more. And one of the things that we saw was, sure, we can get bowls open at these early application timings, but golly, there's a lot of leaf on those plants when they're that immature. And with our current harvest methods and our current, even our gen methods, which are probably common to most cotton specialists, it's hard to really get a good idea of quality. So, well, I say of leaf grade and color grade. We just don't have the proper lint cleaners, and our stripper doesn't have a burr extractor. So, we really looked at this from a bowl opening standpoint, but as the trial went on, we started finding a lot more questions about, leaf grades and sticking leaves early and color grade. So we've certainly, I think, maybe validated some of the old timings, but we also have a lot more questions about when we do go early. So just a quick summary. Again, we have the on-farm variety testing program. Hopefully we're just providing information that can be used as part of that variety selection, variety placement decision. When we look at the impact of proper variety selection, so just from 2021 trials, if you compare, on those results tables, which are now posted, the highest return value to the lowest return value, we had an average of $136 per acre difference between the highest to lowest in 2021. So it's $136 per acre more on average in the highest return versus the lowest return. And there's other ways to look at that. That's obviously the most extreme. But it ranged from 75 to 220. And I think it's still important because, again, every variety that are in these trials are varieties that are being recommended and being marketed for our locations. So, it's not like it's a complete dog variety versus the best. It should be the top 9 or 10 or 16 varieties that are for that area or for that specific trial. From the harvest date standpoint, no change to recommendations. There's a lot of additional work that can be done. But one thing we have seen is there's an opportunity. And this year we had a ton of phone calls. I'm sure everybody on this call, or most of y'all probably know, we had some maturity issues stemming from some of the early season conditions we had, that a lot of areas caught up in September, but a lot of areas didn't. And the phone calls that I had in September and October proved that. There was a lot of cotton out there that needed some more time. It needed another September. So we were able to use a lot of what we found in this state support study to make recommendations this year. And the feedback that we were getting back was that it was working. So not something that we want to use to broad stroke change recommendations, but we're already using information that we've gained from these studies that are supported by our producers and the state support program to help producers in Oklahoma. And that's, to me, that's the whole point of this, is to make sure that this information is turned back around and can be used by our producers. And I'll also say that with the increased support from state support, the increased number in faculty doing work in cotton and OSU, I think we've started to see cotton get more on the radar, and folks on the call that have been in Oklahoma longer than I have can tell you that that's a nice change. And I also, as I get to my last slide here, I wanted to say thank you. And I also want to say thank you specifically to the Oklahoma Cotton Council. I know Harvey's on here. They've been a huge supporter, and I can't say enough about everything they've done for us here at OSU. And my program and everybody here is going to benefit from their support. They just helped us put a new gin room up. So we actually have a cotton room in Stillwater. That's a big deal. So thank y'all, and thanks to the state support group. And Shelley, I can turn it over to Gaylon, or if there's questions, I can try to answer them.
Okay. Maybe while Gaylon's pulling up his presentation, do we have any questions for Seth? I can look in the chat. There's nobody out in the chat. So if any of you have any questions, just go ahead and you can type them in Zap or in chat, or you can just speak up. Everybody good? All right. Well, if you come up with some, we'll take questions at the end. And Gaylon, I'm going to turn it over to you for our Kansas State Support Committee review.
Can you see my screen, Shelley?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. Oh, great job, Shelley and Seth. And some of the comments I'm going to make from the Kansas State Support Committee and some of the projects they're supporting, or we'll follow up on some of the things that Seth has done there in Oklahoma. I was just scrolling through some of the participants here, and we got really good participation from many of the KSU faculty as well. So if any questions come up, I may punt some questions to them, or maybe they'll have comments at the end. And again, feel free to put things in the chat as well. But we have weed scientist Sarah Lancaster and her grad student Tyler Myers that are working on weed control. I saw Lucas Haig, Dan Devlin, and also Jonathan Aguilera, which is the irrigation person out in Western Kansas. So appreciate their participation, and they may have something to add to this as well. And I welcome those comments. But as Seth mentioned, the cotton acres have increased quite a bit in Kansas over the year and over the years. And I'm kind of new to Kansas, so I'm still learning a lot of the faces and cotton production in Kansas. But I think one of the more important things is the acres have seemed to really stabilize, which has allowed, their state support program to really take off as well. Because as Shelley mentioned in the beginning, it's based off an Olympic average. So that yield stability over time really helps the state support funds that are coming back to the state support committee. So I'm trying to advance my slides here. Okay. And one of the major areas that, and similar to what Seth mentioned, one of the major areas in that northern cotton production region is preserving yield and fiber quality. So I know that Seth and Sarah Lancaster, who's the weed specialist, but Sarah also has picked up some of the work in harvest aids. And Seth has been really kind to help do some of the training, with Sarah on this topic. But this year there was support, this in 2021, support for harvest aid trials, and Sarah put out two. One of them had to be abandoned due to misapplication. That was in Hutchinson, but I'll show some of the data here on the next slide. But the whole objective of that project is to focus in on these short season environments, kind of how harvest aids really play into that, not only products, but also timing of that, or maybe even more so timing. And following up on, I think, some of the work that Seth had done, Sarah went out really early with some of her applications to see what impact it would have on yield. And the data I'm going to show, and it's not a whole lot of it at this point, but just Sarah cooperated with Ryan Spear, and this just kind of outlays the project there. All treatments, included prep at 32 ounces, and then they use 15 GPA and 110O2 turbo T-jet tips. And you can see the defoliation treatments there at the bottom. Again, these were some early applications in order to try to figure out, what impact it would have on yield. As many of you know, that the cotton program at Kansas State is kind of in its growing stages. So there's some things to be learned and still sorting through equipment and where it needs to be, when it needs to be. So we don't have yields on this, but this was kind of a demonstration to get some of that information, out to growers on some of these early applications. So Sarah at this particular location made the application at 10 to 20% open bowl. Again, a lot of these traditional products down there, along with Reviton, which is it's a new product being looked at. I'm not sure if it's labeled. I should have looked that up, but I know it's one that is at least being considered. It's another PPO product that's being considered from the harvest aid perspective. Then of course, AIM and Sharpen, which you're probably all familiar with. So this is the Sarah's results here from the harvest aid trial in Sedgwick, Kansas, looking at the defoliation and percent open bowls, with the dark purple being the defoliation levels at 7 days. You can see at 7 days, again, really didn't pull a whole lot of leaves off there. 20% was best, but Folex and AIM were two of the better treatments in this particular study. And then as we go to, then you can see Reviton there at the second rate also was seemed to be pretty competitive. And then going out to 14 days, you can see the defoliation picked up pretty dramatically in that from 7 to 14 days, going about 80% defoliation, and Folex kind of top in that list of, at least numerically, on the percent defoliation. I've covered up Sharpen and Folex here on the side with the deal, but it looks like, again, Folex alone, and that was a 1 pint rate. So again, this is just kind of the information. A lot of you growers kind of know what's going on, but to see these different combinations, especially as new products come on the market, can be very beneficial. So these things can be looked at in small plot and minimize the risk to you guys where you're not having to do it on tons of acres. Sarah's also working on weed management and cotton. That's her training and expertise. So there's quite a bit of work going on in that area where she was looking at the XtendFlex and the Enlist system, basically a comparison. And this is part of Tyler Meyer's master's project. I'm just showing one slide here. They provided some other data to me. But, you know, the point being here, this is just a number of Palmer amaranth, and then you can see the pre-emergence herbicide treatments along the bottom there. And, you know, I just wanted to kind of mention this as input prices are high for you guys, that I just kind of wanted to reemphasize the importance of putting these pre-emergence herbicides down. Again, I'm not as familiar with Kansas as some other places, but I know some folks have moved away from pre's. But hopefully, you know, this is a really good example of what the pre-emergence herbicides bring to the program, and then minimize the pressure on your post-emergence. So it's a good herbicide resistance management approach, but it also gives you a lot more flexibility in your post-emergence program, whether that would be an extend system, enlist, or, you know, even a Roundup Ready or a Liberty Link system. So those were two of the projects that were funded in 2021. Looking forward in 2022, there's the weed control along with the harvest aid work. And this is a new project that's being funded, that's being to be led by Chris Little at Kansas State, basically looking at disease management in cotton. A big part of this is going to be kind of a survey of what's being seen across Kansas as far as seedling diseases and also, you know, within season diseases. As Seth mentioned, there are a lot more viruses now that we're seeing in cotton across the cotton belt than we have in the past. Of course, there's FOV4 down in El Paso area, which is would be a huge concern if it moved out of those arid environments into Kansas and Oklahoma. So again, it's just kind of keeping an eye on things, you know, with the group that we have on the call here this morning. Just kind of make a shout out to you. If you see things, or when you see things, you know, please, you know, contact Chris Little or your county agent and tell them kind of what's, you know, going on here. Contact me or Shelley, and we'll get you in contact with Chris. I neglected to put his email on here, but it's Chris Little with Kansas State, extension pathologist. So look, you can look that up. And also, Chris, maybe just calling on you guys in general, just to look at your farm and see how things look regarding, you know, seedling diseases and other things. So just wanted to make sure and make note of that. With that, that kind of wraps up basically, you know, what I have. I know there's always interest in insect management and disease management. And, you know, hopefully as the cotton state support money increases in Kansas, as, you know, the acres increase, you know, there will be more funds to support some other projects. But that's kind of, you know, where we are today. And the one thing it has really improved over the past couple of years is we've had some really good proposals from, you know, six plus scientists at Kansas State versus, you know, years past, it may have only been one or two. So it's really good to have those ideas, and the state support committee can give strong consideration to each of those proposals. So with that, Shelley, that's pretty much all I had. I will be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. So I'll stop sharing, Shelley, and return it to you.
Okay. Again, does anybody have any questions? You've got Seth, you've got Gaylon on. When it comes to research, I don't know that you can get much better. I see Cater's in the background. We want to make sure that if there's any questions out there, that we get those answered for you guys. As I said earlier, our state support meetings are in July. It's usually the third week of July. And if you would like to know more about those state support meetings, please let me know. I think the majority of you that are on this and connected to the cotton industry get your information from Rex Friesen up in Kansas, or from Jerry Goodson that is in Oklahoma and now is retired. And Seth, I sure hope he gets replaced because he delivers great information. But let us know. We're happy to help. We want to help. You know, my goal is to always have boots in the dirt with you guys. And you know, that's just part of it. Ask questions and let us know how we're doing and give us some ideas.